Hello, and welcome back to episode 2 of ForResting the Soul with Christy. And I am sitting here with my dad, Robert Peterson, again, and we are excited to join you and continue the conversation about the book that my father is writing called This Is Not Who I Am, Journey from 3D to 5D. Hi, Dad.
Hi, Christy. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Doing great. So we're here again. We're showing up again.
Yeah.
We're doing it.
Yep.
I love this. Okay, so last week we kind of got the ball rolling. It was the first time for us to do this. So we are just going to kind of dive into second chapter. But before we get into second chapter, I wanted to just kind of recap for our listeners that we are doing this podcast to really create a fun and easy way to help get your book written, and being able to have conversation about your chapters of your book with all of the episodes of this podcast. We are better able to transcribe it and get it into document format so that you can do all of your edits. And so the first episode that we did last week, we got into the chapter talking about how you become your body. And you had some really beautiful stories from when you were like 2 years old and kind of going up through the ages of that. And so as we're starting to begin this episode, I want to point out that we're going to be covering chapter 2, which is things that make us us. And so it's just kind of furthering the conversation from last week. So one of the things, I've got a list of questions that I'm asking you each episode. And so I think that, before we were getting started here this morning, you made a good reference to something that you wish that you would have brought up last week. But the question on the list today will easily tie right in to that story that you wanted to share. So let's just start with the question of, can you recall any early experiences that first gave you a sense of self or identity?
Yes. When I was about 6 years old, I was a little hellion in...
a little what?
Hellion.
Hellion?
Hellion.
Hellion?
Hellion. And,
Hellion. Okay. I've never heard that term. I'll have to use that.
And I was always getting into trouble because I didn't really respect my body that much. And this kind of made me start to respect my body. I was ice skating up in Chicago, where I live, in south side Chicago. It was very, very cold. And they didn't snowplow the streets like they do in most places. Up there, they just let it pack down, and everybody learned how to drive on it, and that's just the way it was. And what I did is I put my skates on, ice skates, and I got out on the street and I ice skated on the street. And that was fun because you get to go down the hills nice and fast and all this kind of stuff. And I come upon this pond, and this pond was like glass. It was just smooth
Even better.
as glass. It was just beautiful. And I made it a point to try and mark that whole pond up with my skates. But a little belongs to me. I come to a spot where there was a spring, and the spring was feeding up warm water, and I obviously didn't see that. And then I broke through the ice, and I was by myself. I was fortunately about 8 feet from the side of the pond where I could get to the dirt.
Was it deep? Was the water?
The water was deep enough that I could drown, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
The skates were heavy, and I just kept breaking with my elbows the ice.
It's terrifying.
Until I could get over to the edge of the pond. And again, this is Southside Chicago. It was cold. We're not talking cold. We're talking
Super cold. Yeah.
And of course, I had to go back up that hill that I went down. And
were you still in your skates?
I was still on my skates. I didn't want to walk barefooted.
Oh my gosh!
And
cold.
So I was coming up this hill, and from about my chest down was just completely froze. And I couldn't even bend my feet, bend my knees. I was just completely froze. And I come in the house, and my mom had somebody over, and this is what kind of woke me up to the fact that I need to be watching my own self, because whenever I come in, I said, "Mom, I broke through the ice." Mom says, "Oh, that's nice," and there was nothing more said about it. And I got to thinking, my goodness, I could have drowned. And Mom didn't even think anything of it.
And meanwhile, you're frozen
frozen.
Almost hypothermia,
Yes,
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. And those moments were very, very memorable. And it's memorable because my mom didn't acknowledge the fact that I could have passed away. Mm-hmm. And that's
she was just in her own world.
She was in her own world.
Her own world.
Yeah, sure enough. Mm-hmm. Sure enough. Everybody's in their own world. Mm-hmm. And we don't realize it. Mm-hmm. And that was a very memorable moment in my life.
I bet. So did you, were you able to, so you went in there, you undressed yourself, you got out of your wet clothes, you did all that, she didn't even come in and, see how you're doing, or, nothing?
Nothing.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was all on my own.
And
for
you...
7-year-old.
Yeah.
That was shocking to me.
So you have this sense of, well, it's me, myself, and I, and
me, myself, and I, the whole troop of us.
the whole troop of us trying to figure this out. Oh gosh, well, that would be a really early experience. Do you feel like it was a defining physical experience for you? I mean, are there other things like injuries or sports that shaped how you viewed yourself?
It didn't change me physically, other than the fact that I woke up to the fact that I am physical. Mm-hmm. I didn't think about myself as physical. I just thought of myself as someone that was going to live forever, and mm-hmm. so on and so forth. But I did have a very memorable thing happen when I was 11. When I was 11, my dad and we were going to be doing a spring cleaning, even though it was New Year's Eve, 10:30 in the morning, New Year's Eve. And we were going to paint the floor in his workshop, which he had a lot of oil and such on the floor. And of course, paint won't stick to the oil, so we had to get rid of the oil. Mm-hmm. And in all my dad's infinite wisdom, he decided that we would use gasoline to clean up the floor. Well, he was smart enough to open up a window to get ventilation in there. And I was above the 5-gallon bucket mixing it with a electric gun, drill gun. And whenever I pulled it out, I splattered it on my chest. And when I splattered it on my chest, I just took the gasoline rag and wiped it all off. And my dad, we were just about done, and I told my dad, I said, "Hey, Dad, why don't you go upstairs, get us some coffee, and I'll be up there in a minute as soon as I get this last little corner over here. So my dad started upstairs, and he went past the bar, the drinking bar, and there was doors up against it. You couldn't see the bar. But whenever he walked through the door, he brought with him the vapors from the gasoline, and it acted like a fuse. Dad got upstairs, and about the time my dad got upstairs, I heard this great big flash. And whenever I heard that flash, I turned around, and flames were rolling on the walls, flames were rolling on the ceiling, flames were rolling on the floor, and it was just a snap, and I was completely engulfed in flames. I was on fire, and I hollered for my dad. I said, "Dad, help me." Well, my sound of my voice went out that window that we opened, and my dad upstairs thought that I was outside in the backyard. So he ran down the stairs to the backyard. And while he was outside in the backyard, I was thinking beyond a shadow of a doubt, I'm going to die.
Oh my God.
It was just, I'm going to die. And I started crawling up the walls. And whenever I come to that realization that I was going to die, I just hollered out, "Oh, God, help me." And I know everybody's seen a movie picture. And that's exactly what happened. I started seeing a movie picture, and it was like somebody was in my body. And I bent down, I looked underneath the smoke. When I looked underneath the smoke, I didn't see the doors up against the bar. I saw the bar. Now that was pretty amazing in itself. But then I jumped over about 15 foot of rubbish that we was going to throw away, turned a corner, started up the stairs, and my sister had a friend named Debbie Kruger who was spending the night. And Debbie opened the door. She just opened the door for me. And whenever she did, I got to the front porch. And again, this is the south side of Chicago. And this happened to be in 67 whenever we had a real bad storm. And there was a big old snow drift out on the front porch. Well, I didn't see a snow drift. I seen clear blue water, and I dove off that diving board that I saw, and I hit the snowdrift and started rolling in the snowdrift. And whenever I started rolling in the snowdrift, my dad come from around the corner and started scooping snow on me and put me out.
God. Now, why did it, and how did the flame, why did it ignite?
It ignited from the water heater.
Oh.
We had a water heater.
That's right.
And the water heater was a gas water heater.
Okay.
And that's where...
And that was down in the basement.
That was down in the basement,
okay.
right next
and all
to
those
the
fumes.
door. Right next to the door.
Oh, gosh.
The curious thing about that was almost 30 years later, I found what Paul Harvey would call the rest of the story. I was telling the story to somebody at my sister's house, and I said that I was coming up the stairs, and I seen Debbie open the door, and my sister got white as a sheet, and she says, "You couldn't have seen Debbie." She said, "Debbie said that your eyes were closed."
I just got goosebumps all over my body.
And yeah.
Wow.
And it was quite frightening. I didn't, at that moment, I didn't feel any pain after I was down in the basement and come out. I didn't feel any pain. I was going into shock. I went into my bedroom, got my Boy Scout manual, opened up my Boy Scout manual to the burns, and it says, second degree burns will bubble up. And I looked down at my arm, and my arm, on my left arm, you could just see the bubble raising. It was visibly raising. My mom come from around the corner, and she was in hysterics. I said, "Mom, call the ambulance, call the ambulance." And I went down to this edge of the stairs, and I had nylon socks on, and they were melted to my feet. I had to peel them off my feet. And then come the real shocker. I started feeling the pain. And I went over to my neighbor's house while my dad was trying to put the fire out. And when I got over at the neighbor's house, everybody's eyes were as big as golf balls looking at me. And I thought, what in the world do I look like?
So you hadn't seen yourself yet?
I hadn't seen myself.
Oh, jeez.
And Jan, the lady of the house, she had a dresser that had a mirror behind it. And I come up to that dresser and looked at that mirror, and it was like, whoa, I look like barbecue chicken. Mm-hmm. And it took about 15 minutes for the ambulance to get there because of the snow and such.
The slick streets.
And so on and so forth. And they just grabbed a sheet, and wrapped me in a sheet and said, "Do you want to walk down?" And by that time, I was just shaking.
I bet. In shock. Your whole body was in shock. I was going
into shock, full-blown shock. And they brought the gurney in there, and I got on the gurney, and they brought me to the ambulance. And while I was in the ambulance, I kept getting hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold.
Well, you didn't have any. I mean, our skin is the largest organ in the body for temperature regulation, and it was just burned off of you.
Exactly. Yeah, you could literally see the muscle on my right arm. So yeah, that was when I realized that I was 3D, and not only did I realize I was 3D, I thought that I was only 3D. I didn't view myself as a mind anymore. I viewed myself as a body with a mind instead of a mind with a body. And it changed my life for years, until I got myself straightened out. So yeah, it was a pretty traumatic thing that happened.
So how did that shape how you viewed yourself though? Like, I mean, I know you say 3D, but like, did that just, because it altered your physicality so much, did it, like, this is all I am, is just this physical meat suit that I'm wearing, and now it's going to be forever changed, and that's just the way it is?
Yeah, that's... Well, it's kind of like whenever you feel something, and I mean really feel something, you never forget it. It's foremost in your mind. And I really felt that, and I really felt the presence of God. And it was kind of a mixed up deal because I never experienced that again, that experience of God. I felt like God should be always like that. Mm-hmm. So I kind of got somewhat irritated at God because he wasn't around anymore, or so I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent 2.5 months in the hospital. That was a deal on itself. I was used to getting in on the bed on my back, but they had to get air to my back. And because they had to get air to my back, they wanted to use a thing called a striker frame. You can get in on your back, and they put a sheet on your front, and they flip you over. Well, I didn't want that sheet sticking to me.
Right.
And I told them, no, I can get in on my stomach. But my dad told me, whatever they tell you to do, do. And they literally said, no, we want to use the striker frame. So I did what they said. I got in on my back. They put it together. They flipped me over. My genital was hanging out the bottom so that I could go to the bathroom. My face was down in a hole, and they went to take the sheet off, and whenever they went to take the sheet off, the sheet stuck. Well, the logical thing would have been to soak it and pull it off, but they left it there for a couple hours, and it dried. And 2 hours later, when it come time to pull the sheet off, it pulled another whole layer of skin off my back.
God.
My oldest sister, she was in the bathroom down the hall flushing the stool to keep from hearing me scream. I don't even remember it. I was, I guess, totally out of it with the pain. But yeah, it was...
You left your body. I mean, that's how a lot of people deal with trauma, is they just check out.
That's very possible. I wouldn't doubt that a bit. I wouldn't doubt that a bit.
Wow. So how did that, I would imagine that experience kind of leading into our next, exploration of how that shaped your life. How did relationships with family members or friends in that whole scenario, how did it influence who you thought you were or who you wanted to be? And not even just friends and family, but even the hospital, it's kind of a theme, actually. If this is the first time I've heard all of the details of that story. I've heard bits and pieces of it, but the hospital not necessarily having your best interest in mind, trust.
Yeah. The nurse that was responsible for pulling it off and leaving it there, she no longer worked at Ingalls Memorial Hospital where I was.
Good.
My grandfather worked for Ingalls hammer mill, where they hammered out different parts. This was back years ago. This was 1967. And he had a fit. And he said, I do not want that woman working here anymore. And she didn't work there anymore. It was amazing. My left hand was burnt so bad that it swelled up about the size of a 16-inch softball.
16-inch
softball. It was huge.
16 inches.
16-inch.
Oh, circumference. Okay.
Diameter,
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Or circumference. And my dad was always open with me. Some of the things he told me to do I shouldn't have done, but I did what he told me to do. And they called me Bobby, and he says, Bobby, he says, they're wanting to take your left hand off. And I said, I don't want them to do that, Dad. And he says, well, you got to work your hand. You got to do something. I said, get me a ball, a solid ball, rubber ball. And I started squeezing this rubber ball, and I pass it over to the right hand and pass it back to the left hand. And that's all I did, is squeeze that rubber ball constantly. And at 12 years old, I then turned 12. At 12 years old, I could take a bathroom scale and I could squeeze 185 pounds on a bathroom scale.
Whoa.
And my sister Bonnie, bless her heart, I was still ornery.
Mm-hmm.
And Bonnie was trying to make me do what she wanted to do. She didn't ask me, she tried to make me do it. Well, I bucked her on it. Mm-hmm. And she started hitting me. And I've never hit a woman in my life, never, even to this day. And whenever she went to hit me, I would grab her wrist. Mm. She went to hit me with the other one, and I grabbed her wrist. And then she looked at me and wanted me to let her go, and I started squeezing. Oh. And I brought her right down to her knees, and I said, don't you ever hit me again. Mm-hmm. And so it had some good things that come from it. One of the bad things that you might think was good is people started treating me very, very nice and being gentle with me, and because they felt sorry for me. Right. And yeah, I took advantage of it. I took advantage of it. Sure did. Especially with girls. Won't go there. But one of the things that occurred was I was coming off of the painkillers, because they was giving me a lot of painkillers. And after I went home, I was always searching for something. I didn't know what it was. Yep. I just felt like I was supposed to have something in my body. Yep. And I went downstairs behind that bar that had the table, had the doors up in front of it. And I opened up the refrigerator, and there was half of a fifth of gin. And I tipped that gin up and drank half of that half.
Oh, gosh.
And as soon as I set it down, it was like, whoa, that's what I've been looking for. And that was kind of the beginning of my desire for alcohol. Mm-hmm. I would snitch it from my friend's house, mm-hmm. their parents, And so it started, then my parents, they was like, well, as long as you drink at home, everything's okay. Right. And so I got to the point that I was consuming alcohol on a regular basis.
At 12.
At 12. So with that in mind, growing up affected my ideas and identity, such that who you should become was not really in the picture. I was more or less wanting to become whoever I wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And I could because I was enabled so much by people enabling me.
Right.
Which at the time I thought it was good, but it was one of the worst things that anybody could have done.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Did you have any role models? Like,
did I have any role models? Well,
that affected this, I guess, you know.
Oddly enough, I did have a role model. I had 2 role models. Unfortunately, my dad wasn't one of them. My dad, he was my buddy, mm-hmm. but he wasn't my role model. He was my buddy. We'd go fishing, hunting, things like that together. But he never held a job down. He was always jumping from job to job to job to job. And I always thought that was kind of non-intelligent, not wise.
Irresponsible.
Irresponsible, mm-hmm. Yes. Butch, my friend, best friend up the street, his dad went to work for General Motors and stayed at General Motors and worked no matter what. And he worked for General Motors. And I admired that. I admired that greatly. That was one of my role models. A second role model was Brian Danko's father. He was a
Is that another friend of yours?
That was another friend of mine. And his dad was a sergeant on the police force. And you see a police officer and they've got this attitude, so to speak. You know, I'm a police officer. And they've
confidence, maybe? Huh? Confidence.
Confidence and whenever he would come home, he would drop all of that. Mm. And he would just be a regular guy. Mm. And I got to know him as a police officer and just a regular guy. And he become more of a role model than anybody because I wanted to be just like him. I wanted to have respect, and I wanted to be able to come home and be myself. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was one of my role models for sure.
Gosh. So, I mean, that's a major life event. I mean, how did you come back? I mean, you were drinking at 12. Your parents kind of supported it. I mean, as long as you were doing that at home, you had these other role models in your friends' parents. I mean, so then fast forward, how long were you in Chicago?
I was up there for 15 years.
Okay. So did you move from Chicago, you moved from South Chicago to McAllister?
Yes.
Okay. That would be a major event, too.
It was a major event.
From Chicago to southern Oklahoma.
Yeah, it messed my head up pretty good. It messed my head up because of the fact that I did go through what I did medically. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a doctor more than anything in the world. Mm. And I took every class you can take in order to be a doctor while I was in high school. I was taking calculus, I was taking trigonometry 2, I was taking algebra 2, I was taking all kinds of medical classes.
Biology and anatomy.
All of that. Uh-huh. And whenever we moved to McAllister, Oklahoma, it was not only a culture shock, it was a shell shock. I didn't even have to open a book and I can get straight A's.
You weren't challenged.
I had no challenge at all.
Yeah.
Absolutely no challenge at all. I was taking German and Latin up in Chicago. They didn't have it down there in McAllister. My geometry class, it was funny, kind of funny. His name was David Hartman, the teacher, and he would put a formula on the board, a problem, and he would turn around and I'd have my hand raised. He says, yeah, I'd give him the answer. And he shook his head, yeah, and he'd turn around and put one up on the board that was a little bit harder. And he turned around. When he turned around, my hand was raised. He says, Robert, well, they call me Bob. Bob, and I give him the answer. He shook his head, yeah. So then he puts up this other problem that is significantly harder. And he turned around, and I didn't have my hand up. And he kind of smiled because he thought he had stumped me. And then I raised my hand. He goes, yeah? And I give him the answer. And I did all this in my head. And he looked at me and says, you want to go to the library? I said, sure, I'd love to. So I had to go to the library because I was keeping the other children
from being able to
do their class.
Right.
So I lost complete interest.
Yeah.
Complete interest in.
How did that affect your values and your specific beliefs, you know? I mean, were they shaped over the course of, from the fire and then being, having access to, painkillers through alcohol and then changing your sense of self in that and then moving to McAllister? Like, did it kind of mess with your values?
It messed with my values, yeah. I lost respect for myself, which was the scariest thing. My senior yearbook, I wasn't in it because I was drunk. Didn't make it to school that day. It was sad. It was sad what I become. And what was sadder yet was my parents, who should have been not enabling me, were enabling me. We'd have parties, and I'd get drunk as a skunk, and it was okay because I was at home, Yeah. But
I think that's probably, projection. I'm sure there was a lot of guilt, and seeing you feeling better, even though it was not a healthy way to feel better, made them feel better.
I really
Would you agree with that? I mean, shoulda, coulda, there's so many, we could drive ourselves crazy with all kinds of shoulda, couldas, I know I've done that myself with Naya here and there.
Yeah.
And, but isn't it interesting?
Yeah, it really is. My dad and I never did talk.
About it?
About the fire.
Really?
Never talked about it. I always thought that there was going to be more time. And when he passed, he passed quickly. And I had intended to talk to him about it, to ease his mind, let him know that, hey, I don't hold any grudges, It's all in the past. But I never got that chance. We don't get the chances that we would like sometimes in life. Yeah. And I didn't get that chance.
You have taught me so much about not holding grudges, and I appreciate that immensely. You have always been such a good example of leaving the past in the past. And, you know, when somebody apologizes or, you know, takes ownership in something and genuinely apologizes, you know, and okay, it's over, you know, let it go. And, you know, I don't think, I think so often we get so caught up in past, and people live their life in the past, all the, you know, I wish I would have done that differently, or, you know, you can't change it.
No, you can't.
You can't. It's gone. And thank you for teaching me how to navigate that, because, you know, it can ruin your future and your present all the time by worrying so much about what you should have done.
Well, I sincerely appreciate the fact that we could talk. You know, one of the most amazing things I ever seen in my life was whenever you was 3, maybe 4, and you and I was sitting on the sofa and we was talking like we do a lot, and like we did a lot back then. And we went to talking about the moon and how the moon was really big, and you said, no, the moon's real small. And I said, well, hold your finger up. And you held your finger up. I said, pull your finger away. And you pulled your finger away from your face. I said, what's it doing? And you caught it. You caught it. You said, it's getting smaller. I said, that's right. That's right, honey. I'm proud of you. That's what the moon is. The moon's so big we can walk on it. And you said, I said, yeah, you can walk on it. It's just so far away. It looks small. I said, we can get into special airplanes and we can fly to the moon. And it was just amazing. You comprehended all of that at 3 or 4 years of age. It was just totally amazing. But you were always that way. You was always hungry for knowledge. And consequently, it was easy to guide you. I didn't have to teach you. I didn't have to tell you what needs to be done. It was easy to guide you in life, and I appreciated that very much. It was made our relationship a lot closer.
Yeah, we've always been close.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. Looking at our list of questions, gosh, we're covering all of it pretty easily today. But most of it is hinging around this, you know, your experience with the fire and the move. Like, I mean, is there anything that you would want to add to that as far as, you know, something that really, you know, significantly shifted your self-concept or identity other than those things? I mean, I'm sure there could be, but, you know, God, that just seems so, that set it in stone, kind of, you know. I mean, you get through high school, you weren't in the pictures from senior because you ended up having a drinking problem, you know. Yeah. I mean,
yeah. And that alone, which was a consequence of the fire, that alone changed me too, because I become a hermit, a solo, you know.
Well, and you didn't have your friends and your friends' fathers that were role models for
Right.
you up there.
Right.
So you're just in this new town and you don't know many people. You're having to make all the new friends, which I did that a lot growing up. So I'm very well familiar with that. Being the new kid in school, it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh. So, you know, were there cultural or societal expectations that you remember trying to rebel against as part of that? You know, I mean...
The cultural life changed dramatically. I was used to, even though it was Chicago, Southside Chicago, I was used to taking buses and going all the way downtown.
City transport,
Going all the way downtown and going up in the John Hancock building at like 13 years of age.
Wow.
And, you know, there's a couple of friends that went with me. And, you know, that was a lot of fun, dangerous, but a lot of fun. But then when I come down to McAllister, you know, the 126-story John Hancock building was a monster compared to the 6 and 7-story buildings that was in McAllister.
Yeah.
And the town itself was run down, and I didn't have any desire to live in McAllister, Oklahoma. I had no desire at all. But I also didn't have a desire to go back to Chicago. So I felt like I was a time traveler stuck.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good example of how your environment makes you who you are, makes us.
Yes.
You know, as the environment that you're in, not only the environment that you're in your house, you know, in your family bubble, you know, but also when you are in a community that is maybe not the healthiest. And I'll say it out there, and if it gets me in trouble from listeners that might be also from McAllister, Oklahoma, then so be it. But McAllister isn't a healthy town. It's not a healthy city. I mean, there's no, you know, walkability. There's no, you know, the environment is not super conducive to healthy eating and moving your body and all of those things.
And a lot of that has to do with the council, the city council.
Yeah.
The city council, they built the city around 69 and all the food places and stuff.
Highway 69.
Highway 69,
yeah, so
yes.
They know what that means, yeah.
And they're interested in getting money from the people that are going through the town.
Yeah.
Rather than
going to Dallas.
Going to Dallas, yeah. And a lot of it's trucks.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, it was a culture shock.
Is that what brought you guys to McAllister? Like, was it Grandpa driving truck?
No, actually, that was a kind of a funny deal. My Aunt Pat, her husband Jerry, he was from the McAllister area, and he got the desire to move back home, and so he moved back home, and of course Aunt Pat had to come with him. And whenever she got down here, she started talking to my dad, saying, "Bob, you need to come down here. I'm scared. I don't like this." Oh. And she talked my dad into coming down. And my dad come down and bought a restaurant.
Big brother to the rescue.
Big brother to the rescue. And he bought a restaurant. And I worked in the restaurant, and that's whenever I was in high school, I had gained so many credits. I could have graduated as a junior. And so what I did is I started working on school for half a day, and I'd work for a half a day, and I got credit for that. Mm. And I managed the restaurant at night.
Okay. Wow.
But my Aunt Pat is the one that wanted him down there.
I see.
She always thought that she was going to a place that had teepees and Indians. She literally thought that there was going to be a community of Indians and teepees.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, Aunt Pat. Aunt Pat, the one who sounds like Marge Simpson.
Yeah.
We've always gotten a laugh out of
her. She's so sweet.
I love her. Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, I mean, do you think that you had to like start letting go of certain ideas, of what you thought you were going to be and become because of this new environment that you're in? And I mean,
all my ideas changed.
All of it changed. So being a doctor was out the window.
Being a doctor was out the window. My dad basically said there's no way we can afford it. And by then I wasn't taking the courses that I needed to take. Mm-hmm. I did start working for a hospital as an orderly, and learned a lot of stuff, mm-hmm. seen a lot of stuff, amazing things, absolutely amazing things. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I tried to get in the military. I tried to get into the Air Force. I took the tests, aced all the tests. They were like, all right, we got us a Air Force boy here. Then I had to take the physical, and I flunked the physical because I didn't have mobility of my right arm.
That came up in the last episode too, the mobility of your right arm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Wow.
And that's how I was going to go to school and become a doctor.
Yeah, right.
So that went out the window.
Mm.
Just pretty much everything I was trying to do kept going out the window. And the universe was showing me something, but I didn't know what it was. I still don't really know what it was, other than the fact that I ended up meeting a guy named Jerry. He lived across the street. And Jerry was the kind of guy that when he was 5 years old, he was building radios. Mm. And I was fascinated by that. And he went to telling me about all the different things that is going on in the electrical world. And I was just trying to get a job. Mm-hmm. I got one job that was getting rid of hot tar and putting polyurethane down. And polyurethane is the hardest thing pound for pound in the world. And it's very, very well insulated. But you got to sweep off the gravel. And I had a 48-inch power sweeper, and I got too close to the edge of the building. It was a 2-story building, and the rascal pushed me off the building, because if you raise it up a little bit too high, it bites into the roof real hard, and it takes off backwards. And it took off backwards and pushed me off. And bear in mind, this is just a 2-story building. And in that 2 stories, what went through my mind was, I'm falling off a building. The machine's coming down behind me. The machine weighs 500 pounds. It's going to land on me. I need to get away from it. And I pushed the machine and I hit the ground. Both my feet hit flat and my butt hit right in the middle of my feet.
Oh my God.
And that could have gone a lot worse.
Yeah.
Could have gone a lot worse. That machine could have fell on me and boogered me up pretty good. So the universe has been watching over me.
Yeah. Hence the book. I mean,
Yes.
so many times.
Yes. Yes.
You have, yeah. You have a purpose. There's something.
Yes.
And I think, I'd venture to say that sharing this story is part of that.
Yeah.
Because your mindset is what has kept you going all these years amidst the chaos.
Everything happens for a reason. Everything is as it should be.
You've been saying that for the last couple of years, and I've adopted it as well. I mean, I've always believed that everything happens for a reason, everything has a purpose. A lot of times, especially when things are synchronistic, that's when I'm really feeling that 5D, and that's like, do you think that, and we're kind of getting close to our time here, so gosh, it's been a great episode. Thank you for all that you've shared. I think that probably, I mean, would you venture to say that was kind of when you started realizing that 5D existed yet, or were you even there yet?
Somewhere between the fire and there.
Yeah.
Somewhere between the fire and there. Whenever I see something bad, I always know there's something good.
Mm-hmm.
It's pointing me to something good. I just got to find it. And I've yet to find something bad and not find something good.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the yin and the yang, the dark and the light.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we ended up talking quite a bit about the fire today. It's kind of hard to not talk about that whenever we're trying to figure out, get to the bottom of what makes you and what has made you. And that's actually for your chapter 3. Our next chapter is about the fire. So, if we want to save more of that story for next week,
sure.
Let's do that.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you for sitting down and having a cup of coffee with me today and chatting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been nice.
It has been nice. All right, you guys. Well, we are, we're wrapping up here close to an hour now. So we're going to hang the hat on this second episode of ForResting the Soul with Christy. And I'm sitting here with my dad, Robert Peterson, hearing all about his life. And today's episode was all about what made him who he is today and his self-identity and self-concept. So I encourage all of you to maybe ponder on that and maybe journal about it. Looking back over your life, what do you think of? What was one of your memorable moments that really formed your self-identity and made you? So something to think about. All right, you guys.
Absolutely.
Until next time, make it a great day. And I'll talk to you guys next week. All right. Bye.